Hello students, it is I, Mr. Mikasa, and it's time for another edition of Mr. Mikasa's Digital Lessons. And this is a digital lesson for my 7th grade Social Studies class, and today we'll be covering his textbook pages 284 to 289, which is about the ancient Romans. So if you want to download those textbook pages and read along with us and follow along as we're going through the material, that is perfectly fine. In fact, I highly suggest it. And as always, as you guys are going through this textbook lesson, I will be making my desktop annotations real quick using this program in order to highlight some of the more key and important information that's available for these pages. So that being said, let's get this lesson on a roll about the ancient Romans. So the reason why we're talking about the ancient Romans is because the ancient Romans, much like the ancient Greeks that we talked about last time, have a huge role in the way that the Western world developed. In fact, Western culture, especially for culture in the United States, and especially our form of government, we get it from two different places. We get it from the ancient Greeks as well as the ancient Romans. So understanding the way the ancient Romans operated and how their government operated, how their people operated is very, very important for the region because it also had a huge impact on Europe as well. So like we said before, when it originally came to Rome, Rome was built along the Tiber River, which is in modern day Italy, and basically just a group of just villagers originally. There were 7 different large hills that were near the Tiber River. Each of these hills belonged to a different tribe of people. All 7 of these tribes kind of united together and decided to ally amongst each other. And even though they started off with really humble beginnings, it developed into one of the largest and most powerful empires the world had ever seen at that time. And because of that, during this time period, what ended up happening is that the Romans, for about 200 years after being ruled by kings, in 509 BC, the Romans decided to adopt a republican style of government, which is the same kind of government that we use today here in the United States and pretty much the entirety of the world, for democracy anyways. A republic is a nation in which powers belong to the citizens who then govern themselves through elected representatives. So what ends up happening is that the people vote for leaders. All right, it's pretty much how a republican system works. All right, and those leaders, of course, make laws, and they make laws and rules and things, and that's how basically things get done. And the election, the group that was responsible for this within Rome at that time was called the Senate, as it was called. These were the elected representatives who were hired to represent the Roman Republic. These are the guys who also were responsible for the laws. They also elected 2 different leaders called councils, and those guys led the government as well as the military. Okay, so every time Rome went to war, they would have 2 councils. One would go to war and fight for Rome and fight, while the other one would stay home and protect the country itself. Now, even though this republican form of system was really, really important and a huge step forward, though, the problem with it, though, is that this Roman republic system that they created was flawed. All right, it was flawed for one simple reason. It was based around money. Okay, basically both based around wealth. And this is why the republican system starts to fall apart the moment that it's made. And the reason why that is the case is because Romans at that time period were divided amongst 2 different social classes. You had patricians and you had plebeians. These were the 2 different types. Patricians were members of the wealthy land-owning families. All right, that's who they were. While plebeians were things like your common person didn't own property. They were like your farmers, your craftspeople, just ordinary people. Now, here's where the problem comes into effect. To become a senator within Rome, to run for the republic, to become a member of the republic, you had to be a patrician, which means you had to have wealth. All right, those were the only people that could be elected to office. All right, so if you weren't wealthy, let's say you were a plebeian, you could never run for office. Yes, you could vote for your patricians, you could vote for your leaders, but you yourself could not become one for the longest time. It wasn't until 287 BC that they actually ended with that. And the reason why is because they actually had a civil war amongst their country between rich and poor people for the most part to make that happen. All right, so because that for the longest time that wasn't the case. And the reason why we talk about this and why it's so important is because this eventually leads Rome from being a republic to an empire, and we're actually going to talk about that here in a second about what caused that to happen. So this caused a lot of turmoil for people right off the bat. So for example, when the United States decided to become a democratic republic, where we decided to have democracy to elect leaders and have democracy and republican form of government, we made sure as a country that this whole patrician plebeian system didn't take place. Originally, some of the founding fathers wanted to adopt this system, like you had to own land in order for you to run for office or to vote. But luckily, another portion of the population said, no, that's a bad idea because look what it did to Rome. It destroyed Rome in the end. So that's an example of things working for us. And so that's how their government kind of worked out. All right, but we'll talk about that later, about how that caused problems later on. Needless to say, over the next few hundred years as Rome became a republic, Rome grew into a mighty city, and after that they became a huge power within the entire area. They started going to war with other city-states like the city-state of Carthage, which is in North Africa and Spain. They fought those guys. Then as their population grew, their military also grew as well, and because of that they started claiming more and more territory as time went on. They decided to expand their country very rapidly by invading other territories and claiming their resources as well as their people and bringing them into their empire. In fact, as you can see in this map here, originally Rome was just a city-state. So like we talked about city-states in the last lesson with the ancient Greeks, right? So we had talked about the ancient Greeks and those people. That's originally what Rome was originally. It was originally a city-state. They went to war with Carthage, another city-state across the Mediterranean Sea from them because of shipping reasons. But when they defeated Carthage in what's known as the Punic Wars, and not only did they take over Rome, but they also started taking over territory. So because of that, Rome started expanding outward from itself. They first took over the entire Italian peninsula, then they took over Sicily, they then invaded into Carthage, into Sardinia, to Corsica. They then started branching out into Spain, northern Italy, and Greece, as well as Turkey, and they started invading these areas and started to generate a lot of wealth and power for themselves. Alright, so that's pretty much how they basically created the entire area. They started conquering this entire region around the Mediterranean Sea, attacking the coastlines and bringing those into their nation. And over in time, Rome stopped becoming a republic at that point and started becoming what's known as an empire. Okay, and this is a key thing to remember when it comes to empires. All right, what is an empire? What causes an empire to be an empire? An empire is a nation that controls other nations. All right, so not only do you have your nation, but you're controlling nations outside of yourself. And the moment that your country stops becoming a country and starts becoming empire, historically speaking, it always ends up being bad. Empires usually fall apart, okay? Every single empire that ever existed on the planet Earth has eventually fallen apart. Heck, even the empire in the Star Wars movies failed in the end, all right? So you never really want to become an empire. You always want to stay your normal country as well. So because of that, the reason why this causes problems is because we're going to talk about that real quick, about how this causes problems, especially for the government, especially when we're talking about government changes. This whole empire building started becoming a huge problem. And this problem became because of a man named Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a Roman general and famous speaker, and he was a governor of no territories, right? What ended up happening, though, is that he was conquering territories in what is known as Gaul. Gaul is modern-day France, is where he was going, okay? Now, as he started conquering new territories, his reputation and his power really grew because people saw him as being this heroic force who was conquering, expanding territory for the Roman Empire, for the glory of Rome. He was bringing about large amounts of wealth to the Roman people. Julius Caesar was also smart. Whenever they conquered territories and gathered valuables, he would share his valuables and his wealth with his troops, so his soldiers became extremely loyal to him. So because of that, the people became very fearful of him. And even though he did that, what ended up happening is that Caesar decided that this whole process of him conquering territories was not enough for him. He wanted to be the man in charge. So basically what ended up happening is that by 45 BC, he invaded Rome itself and eventually became the dictator of the Roman Empire, is what he decided to do. And the reason why he wanted to do that, because he felt that it was, he wanted the power, he wanted the wealth, and so he just went up and did it. And by becoming a dictator over Rome, Rome stopped being a republic at that point. It became a traditional empire where one person was responsible for taking care of everything and controlling everything as well. So because of that, Caesar became a dictator. That was until March 15th, 44 BC, where the senators basically assassinated Caesar. Caesar was assassinated and a civil war developed. Eventually, after several years of civil war, in the end, Caesar's adopted son, who was his nephew, name is Octavian. Octavian was like his sister's son, I believe is where he was, and his sister died, so because of that, Caesar was responsible for him because he adopted him. Octavian basically won the war in the end, and after that, the Roman Empire was really under the control of one person. That's when Rome stopped being a republic and became more of an empire at that point. And because of that, Octavian also changed his name to Augustus. In fact, the month of August that we have in our calendar, that month was named after Emperor Augustus, because nothing says I'm powerful than having a whole month dedicated to you on the calendar, okay? So that's what ended up happening. So because of that, for the next 40 years, it was known as the Augustine Age, Rome continued to expanded very rapidly. The military became very powerful as well. Their borders were secure. They conquered huge amounts of territory. So now, as you can see here on the bottom of the page, Rome is now a massive empire that's pretty much conquering the entirety of Rome. So not only just Rome, but the entire Mediterranean. So now they control all of modern day France, all of modern day Spain. They control all of North Africa as well as Egypt at that time period. They control the Middle East. They control Greek and the Balkan Peninsula. They control Italy as well. They control pretty much the entire region. Also in this time period, they actually start sending out troops into England. So they start conquering modern day England as well. So their empire is at this maximum size that it could possibly be under Augustus' rule. So because of that, the military conquered a huge chunk of territory, created a lot of peaceful ones and stability in the region. And because of this, with the Augustine Age, we start seeing a lot of development taking place. We see a lot of trade taking place, as well as a lot of pottery being made. We start seeing the development of literature and poetry. We start seeing a lot of artistic work coming about during this time period. This period was known as the Pax Romana, in Latin, which basically means Roman peace, where because Rome was no longer fighting anybody and had completely dominated the region for the next 200 years, we start seeing a lot of development taking place within Rome. However, even though the Roman Empire was so large and so powerful, though, things start crumbling away at Rome. Rome eventually does fall apart in the end. We're going to talk about some of the factors that led to that later on. But as Rome, of course, continued to grow, of course, we start seeing a brand new religion popping up during this time period. We start seeing the rise of Christianity. After Augustus Caesar died in the year 14 AD, we start seeing a new religion breaking out in the Middle East, and it's called Christianity. Right? It became very, very popular in the eastern half of the Roman Empire. It spread quickly throughout the Middle East, as well as into Greece and also into North Africa. So we start seeing this religion really, really take off. All right, and the reason why it was able to spread so quickly is because of the trade network that Rome controlled within the region. By building roads and establishing safe routes of passage for quick travel throughout the entirety of the Roman Empire, this religion spread like wildfire, going throughout the entirety of the planet. Not the entirety of the planet, throughout the entirety of the Roman Empire. Now, Roman leaders were originally okay with it, but the problem was they were saying that the Christians were becoming more powerful than they were because more and more followers were joining into it. So because a lot of Roman emperors tried to stop it from happening, starting in 64 AD, Christians were heavily persecuted against by Roman leaders in that time period. In fact, one Roman emperor, his name was Emperor Nero, he was notoriously known for his cruelty towards Christians. He would do things like burning them at the stake, feeding them to lions, all kinds of horrible stuff to him during that time period in order to suppress that religion. And that kept on going on for the longest time until about 306 AD, when Emperor Constantine decided to adopt Christianity into the Roman Empire. On 312 BC AD, during a battle, he thought he had a religious vision that took place. So because of that, he decided to dedicate the Roman Empire to Christianity, and Christianity became the entire religion of the Roman Empire. In fact, it's led up to even today, where there's over 2 billion people around the planet who practice this religion. Just because the Romans adopted it, and because wherever Rome went, the religion went with them as well. And so that's the reason why it spread so quickly, like I said before. So these are the things that led to Rome. So this is the rise of Rome, becoming from a republic to an empire to a dictatorship, all the way to where it is now. Eventually, the Roman Empire will fall apart, and we will actually talk about that in the next section over. So what you need to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is now answer questions 3A, 3C. Remember, you also answer question number 4. These are done in race format, where you guys restate, answer, cite, as well as explain. And as always, you guys, if you have any questions or concerns whatsoever, please feel free to type up in the discussion box down below, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can or help you guys out with that. So that's going to do it for this edition of Mr. Mikasa's Digital Lessons. We will catch you guys in the next one. You guys stay safe. You guys stay healthy. We'll catch you guys in the next lesson. Peace out, you guys.